America.
Oh, okay.
You guys are traveling.
I'm here, man. I don't want to ever go anywhere either.
Oh, no kidding. Glad to get.
Hello.
Good, how you doing? Mom and dad must not have been.
A lot warmer than I thought it would be.
And something's happening.
No, coming in.
You're taking a boat over. Are you still in the water?
Yeah.
Are you proud? I'm not gonna get the marks on you.
I was in the water yesterday. Beautiful. Yeah.
I like the sun. It's like just putting around.
Wet roots and cold weather.
It's just
Yeah,
nice.
wet roots.
And pretty soon you won't be able to.
You didn't get the letter.
Pretty much this year it's already, we didn't go, went to Beaver once. Darwin once, Point City once. Bay Harbor. Hey, you're early.
Right on time.
You said 4:09.
What I sprang with.
Figure if you're there before it's over, you're on time.
I feel bad if you were here and I was.
I'm here.
How's the hand?
Good. That's way smaller hands.
Oh, that's good.
What'd you do?
You know, prodding snow. Pushed my thumb off. My hand. 40 years of prodding snow. Driving a spud down into the snow. Tore apart this basal joint. My thumb is falling off.
A lot of
The
positive.
last 3 years it started to show up.
That's brutal.
This hand's.
I mean,
The issue, I didn't prod so much. Right here.
that's more.
The damn pin. It goes through that bone, it ties into this bone. You can't get it away.
I worked on it before.
On the side.
When you did the crash in Park City one, did that come through when they had it, you know, big deal. Yeah. Oh, you actually did it? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And they took my cast off yesterday. I got green, I'm looking at this and going, that's.
Did you ever come here?
Yeah. Robleski. He's really good.
Is that?
You think it's serious progress.
Why
I had
did
done 3
audience?
weeks of trying, and the sailboat came out early.
Come on in.
Trailer went away. Touched my bike. Yes, sir.
All right.
Miss me. We had-
Bet I like that so much.
How are you?
Oh, okay. You rent a new bike?
That's for a lot.
Most of it back to right. We ran out of the doors today.
You see a lot? You
Oh, yeah.
gotta see a lot.
I got it. All right. What did you do?
Day or a day
No.
and a half. Power station. That. And that's even longer. That's time.
People like that constantly. Is me putting some tags in it?
Right. Even Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah. It's right next to the property. Yeah.
Out there.
You better not.
Gotta get out of there.
I don't know. See, anywhere.
For the tech.
All right, it is 4 o'clock. Let's call the October 12th meeting of the Harbor Commission to order. And Rachel, are you? Do the roll call.
Yeah.
Fire away.
Tom Graham.
I'm here.
Jeffrey Dick.
Here.
Karen Sell, Tim Everett,
Here.
and Bill Brown.
Here. So we have six, we have a quorum. We're in good shape. Minutes were in your packet. Were there any changes from our meeting in August?
I just had one comment to make, towards the end of the minutes, where I was quoted as saying that Ford Park needs more, space to unload and reload boats at Ford Park. And what I was really referring to was something for kayaks and for paddleboards. Really a space where we could unload, especially paddleboards, because all like you can do right now is either park on the cement and haul them across the parking lot, or pull into the grass and hope nobody yells at you, and then unload it and repark the car. So that was pretty much what my comment was about towards the end of the minutes. It's the last page.
So
Where it was said.
what would you? How would you like to?
I would
change the
add,
minutes?
loading of kayaks and paddleboards at Ford Park.
So you want to change boats to kayaks and
Right.
paddleboards? Did you catch that, Rachel? That's good, because that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Right.
You get to watch me write about the. No.
While you're doing that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written with those changes.
Is there a second?
A second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same for opposed. Motion passes. Thank you. Public comment. Cool.
Different than.
Small.
Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, can we approve it by consensus with a head nod? Everybody good with that? Thank you. All business. Harbor plan approval and recommendation for council adoption. We have been working on this now for a few months. And Victor has incorporated our comments.
Looking for further edits from other folks.
He is still waiting to get edits from Tip of the Mint. That's the only piece of this that I believe is not put together.
Then we probably need to put this up for the next minute or next meeting.
Well, I think we can approve it as submitted.
Okay,
And then what's going to come from Tip of the Mint is updated data, not policy or
Oh,
procedure
okay.
or any of that kind of stuff. And if there's something unusual with that, then we'll come back to the table. But I think what we'd like to do is approve the plan, knowing that we still have some data that's missing from one vendor, so to speak. And when we get that, it can go to council.
well, I think we've beaten it up pretty good and added and subtracted and all that stuff, so I would make a motion that we approve this version pending any additions or deletions from Tip of the Mint.
Motion's been made. Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thanks, Jim. Any further discussion from the table? And Richard, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Tom Graham,
Yes.
James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes,
and Chuck. Governor,
Yes.
and Bill Brown.
Yes.
great. Thanks to the public for all the input on this, everybody at the table, and staff's work for putting this together. This will now await final stuff from Tip of the Mint and then go to the council table for their review. And then pending that, it goes on to the state of Michigan and both townships for their acceptance on it. So thank you. Once every 20 years. So, new business. The first item on the table is no wait discussion. And there is in your handouts some comments from commissioners who are not here for whatever reason on that. And here they are. They'll be in this packet right here. And as it pertains to this discussion, let me just read those so we all know what's going on with This is from John Baker. Regarding no wake zones, he says, I realize there is congestion in the harbor at times. I think that every boater should make an effort to promote safety. Power boats by being alert and courteous, and kayaks and SUPs by avoiding high traffic areas. I also think we should install maps at the harbor at both the boat and kayak launch ramps. And Michael, we do have a map at the launch ramp itself, not at the kayak side, but at the launch ramp side. He also would like to consider a maximum speed. He recognizes it may be hard to enforce, require full-time ring patrol, but it would be helpful. So those are, he goes on to say that limiting the entire harbor to no wake significantly limits the use of many small power boats unable to run at any speed outside of a harbor on a typical day. So that's John's comments. Laura Coors, she says, I would like to express my concerns regarding no wake zones. Before we take action on change, I would like to see a study or observation in place to see if perception and safety are impacted by our dual wake. I propose we revisit this a year from now with more data to help evaluate. As a user of the harbor by both boat and paddle, I find the dual designation a good plan. And then finally, Bill McCullough. And I'll paraphrase a little of this because it's wordy. But Bill says, I don't think changing the current wake zone is wise. And the reasons it was created in the first place are still valid, and he is against changing it. And he goes on to say that while wake boats and wave runners are troublesome, most of the wake problems he sees are due to 30-foot plus cabin cruiser vessels. Their wakes extend the length of the harbor, reflect off of everything, and combined to create an uncomfortable setup. And he is on board with a suggestion I'm going to bring forth on this about additional enforcement. And if there's any way we can kickstart some wake responsibility education, he'd be up for that too. So those are the comments from commissioners who are not here. And I think that if there's anything that anybody in the audience would like to add, that'd be a good time before we start to deliberate this a little more. So Lisa, I'm sure you have something you want to say.
Lisa Nichols, 638 West Wolf Drive. I think you might have received some of the letters, but we got the comments from people.
They are all included in our package.
Yeah, and a couple of the people I didn't really know, and it was really nice to hear them say that they were power boaters and that they did have exemptions in that no wake zone, in the wake zone, but that they would be willing to make a no wake for the whole harbor. And so far, except for these 3 individuals, I haven't received any non-positive comments when people have seen me or from the article or anything like that. I guess what I was hoping that we could at least ask the question that the Harbor Commission could take the proposal for all powered vessels to the DNR and at least ask the question if we could even do it. They might tell us, no, you can't. You made that decision in 1975 and you're stuck with it. But
I can answer that now because we have talked to the DNR recently. We went through that no wake for wakeboards.
that's different because you were discriminating against one group, which I wouldn't do that. It would be for all powered vessels, whether they're 10 foot or 25.7 foot.
Right, and I specifically asked that question at that time with those guys, and they said, we certainly can't do that.
Okay, so I guess except for the 3 people, I'm seeing this from people that have non-powered and powered as this would be a win-win proposal. So I guess I'm just kind of hoping that we could at least do some work on it and go forward with the idea. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yes, sir.
Keith Pemberry, West Weekly. I do powerboat and powerboat responsibly. I think that we need to leave and I do swim I used to swim from Weekly to Harbor Point, and I do have kayaks. I think we should really pause here and look at the opportunities. Pause before we make changes. Look at how we can improve education and after education enforcement. So I would, before we make the whole harbor no wake, I would think there, we need to educate and look at enforcement. And then if that's not working, come to this point of, do we do it? So what we do is we're focusing on July and August. There are times of the year in June and May. And actually September is a wonderful boating month. That there is low congestion and you can power boat or water ski in the harbor outside, the existing no wake zones. So not every time is high impact times a year.
Appreciate that.
I
Yes,
have more of a question on this topic. If you were to go full no wake across the entire harbor, could you ever undo it and go back to the current setup?
I don't know that we can ever say that you can never do something. But I do know how much effort went into coming up with the bilateral system we have right now. And that was significant. Very significant. It is the only one in the state of Michigan. It took, and I helped work on it. It took political pull and it took a long time to do it. So my answer in the short term would be no. And that's the sense I got when I talked to the DNR about this wake boat deal. When we were trying to solve the problem that way. Was it would be an uphill battle to do. I think if we let it go, we wouldn't get it back.
That would be concerning to me if for some reason a full no wake had negative impacts on the usage of the harbor. That you couldn't get back what you had given up to get there. So just throwing that out.
Appreciate that comment. Yes, Michael.
Michael Esposito, Irish Boat Shop. So I don't know the answer to this question, but to piggyback on what you just said, I also agree it would be exceptionally difficult, if not impossible, to go back. So that in itself warrants a little bit of time to look at the subject. I want people on the water in paddleboards. I want them in kayaks, all of those things. But part of the uniqueness of Harbor Springs is that dual system. So there is boating activity that takes place in that high speed zone that would not be able to, and it wouldn't take place because there is no other place to go out. You can't go out in the bay with a little boat. So as much as it would benefit one group, it would hinder some other group. Also, part of this concern is the fact that we use Ford Park as the primary paddleboard and kayak launching area because it's already in the high speed zone, basically when you get out of the mooring field. I'm not suggesting we use the city beach, but for example, if it was at that end of the harbor, you would enter a no wake zone and you could stay in the no wake zone. You can go all the way to the point to the mooring field. So there's a function of how we use the harbor, and it just happened the way it is. Everybody deserves safety in the harbor, but there's always two sides to safety. I can tell you is when I operate boats, and I do it a lot, my biggest concern are kayaks because you can't see them. It doesn't mean they're bad. I don't want to get rid of kayaks, but in the safety world, there's two different things, or there's multiple things. So anyway, it might just be, I think we should look at it. There is no data. We're not working with any data about what cases there are. There have been accidents in the harbor this season. I don't think she is here, more than normal, but I think they've all been outside that zone or at night. So they're not, it's not contributing to that, those are other factors. So in the end, I would just like to see this looked at over the long term because we won't go back. And that's a very unique feature of Harbor Springs. Thank you.
Ward.
Ward Wallstrom, speaking on my own behalf, I agree with Mike. I grew up here. I agree with the way it's set up now.
Appreciate that. Any other comments? Well, then we'll
Can I ask a question? No.
have one of those folks.
No.
Because we'll bring the discussion back to us now. On that, so thank you for that. So, Karen, would you start off board deliberations?
Okay, so a question, Rachel and Michael, have you had any complaints from any paddlers at all recently about be knocked off their paddle boards or whatever, not hurt anything?
Not directly to me, no.
I can understand the concern brought up by Lisa because I've been knocked off a couple of times from bigger wakes than should have been. So maybe it is a question of education and more visibility of this as an issue perhaps. And maybe and then also patrolling perhaps then, we could make a better decision next season about it. I do understand the concerns because I've had some of the same myself, even in my kayak. So it's a real world, I mean, you get waves, then you see this big boat wake coming right at you. And if you don't get the right angle, you're gonna be knocked off the board. So I think it's just a matter of really trying to educate people on just trying to maintain safe speed. Even if it's way below what the speed limit actually is in the second zone. I mean, just that consideration of people that are actually on the water in smaller vessels, even like sunfish and small sailboats. I would propose the education.
My one question that you asked, which was great, and then Michael alluded to, and then you answered. That's a huge concern, and I agree. I don't think you can go back. So it's either all or none type of thing, either leave it alone or whatever. So maybe more patrol, an hour a day more, 2 more hours a day, plus education. Maybe that's the answer, and then talk about it in a year.
Yeah, I don't know if our more patrol, I mean, it's a function of the wake, and if it's legal, then they really can't stop you for having the wake. But I'm for not changing it. I like the ability to have pleasure boats use this harbor because the prevailing winds are from the west and you really can't do a lot of activities in the bay. And so I'm for not changing.
Tom, you want to chip in or you?
I'm happy with the way it is. Yeah, he's one of the reasons we're doing it, that is the water speed off the harbor.
Right.
The harbor comes out.
From my perspective, I understand the concerns. But I think the solution here is to not do any changes now. I do have, we worked hard to get this level in here and to let it go without some serious consideration does not make sense because it will be gone on this. The reality is, even if we went all no wake now with this, it would be meaningless without enforcement. And at the enforcement level that we have now, which is basically one volunteer police officer who does a great job getting out there, but he's got a full-time job and he's maybe not out there when the times are busy. And we do the best we can, but it isn't sufficient. And I think the solution here in the short term is to recommend to council that we hire a seasonal full-time Marine Patrol officer. We have the equipment. That would come out of the waterfront budget as the pay does for that right now for our one officer that we have. And let's put them on the water, and let's put them on the water in the time periods where we have activity from 11 to 7, not from 8 o'clock in the morning until noon, or from 7 o'clock at night until 9. And let's keep a handle on this. And the purpose there would be twofold. One is education, and the other will be enforcement. If we have somebody who is a consistent violator and we've got wakes, we can go at it. Because the other way to slow down the wake problem, if you're a paddleboarder out there, is regardless of if somebody has the right size boat and they're in the right area, if they're making a wake that's too big and it causes damage or physical harm to the individual, they're still liable personally for that action on their boat. And we're not in a good position to react to any of that because there's nobody to call when you're out there when it happens. And we virtually have no presence on the water. So I think by putting somebody out there, we're going to be able to solve this problem a couple of different ways. And if it turns out we learn that we have to do something else, well, then we've got good data to work with and we can move forward. I'm not in favor of changing it now. I am in favor of jumping up our enforcement to a 40-hour a week or more if we can get it out there.
And who's gonna be up the funds or to hire a full-time?
We'll make it happen. The funds are there. We had another reasonable year and funds are there. So That would be a council decision, of course, but our recommendation would be for that to happen. And I've not talked to Kyle, the chief, about this. I did mention it to Victor, and I think he understands the setup. And my purpose wouldn't be to have somebody out there writing tickets left and right, but to make sure we have a presence on the water, we're educating where we need to, and when we have to enforce, we enforce. Which is our approach right now, and that seems to be effective with these. So,
One question. We talked about potentially adding another full-time person. That would be in addition to our part-time person.
Dean can go out anytime he wants.
We could sit here and legislate all the rules and not change anything, but if you don't enforce it, and I do mean enforce it, we have rules on the books now in the town which we don't enforce because they're not enforceable. And I think we all know speed limits. If you went to the state and said, do a survey, speed limit says 30, people do 35, they're not going to lower it. They're going to raise it to the actual. So it's incumbent upon us to suggest enforcement, not just a hand slap, and enforcement, really on enforcement. We have rules which even today, if they were followed, probably we wouldn't be here discussing this at great length. But I get where we're coming from as far as not changing the lay of the land. But I'm hell bent to say, if we're going to do it, then we really need to do it, not little hand slaps. If it's a no wake zone, then it's a no wake zone and you get a ticket. But do it unilaterally all the time, consistently.
I think that probably would fall underneath the chief's purveyance. We can't tell the officer what to do.
No, but if you.
But I think we can certainly communicate that.
If it says no wake, it should be no wake.
Builder, who didn't speed on our way to this meeting today? Who stayed 20, who went 25 miles an hour on Basement?
On 3rd Street, I came right down 3rd.
No, 75, I'm fine to do.
I understand your concern, and I'm not afraid to write a ticket.
No, we've listened to everyone's complaints and they're valid. I'm a boater. It's no fun on a 32 footer without an engine when somebody goes by in a no wake zone. You get bounced around pretty good. But you know what? It's been happening like that for a long time. And until we actually do something with the rules we have on the books today, adding more rules, if you don't have a strict enforcement, we're going to be back here again in a couple of years talking about the same thing.
Are you suggesting we need more rules?
No, we need more enforcement of the rules we've got.
Do that, but you just said adding more rules. So
I've said if we add more rules and you still don't have any more enforcement, you're not going to have any change in behavior. That's what we're trying to do, is change behavior.
One thing about it
So
is,
you want to use a club, I get it. So
You need to make a point. I mean,
if
think
you
about
have
how-
a patrol boat out there more hours, people see that and people actually are gonna obey the rules more than if not
presence helps.
presence.
We can communicate that to the chief, but we can't tell the officer to write a ticket every time.
No, that's his discretion.
Pulling people off.
So, yes.
Hey, Jim, could you give me the history of why we're even considering this? Was there an accident or was this just brought as for us to consider?
Greg, was that directed to me?
Yes. I mean, we're discussing it because it was brought to our attention that there was an issue or there was an accident. Why are we debating whether we should change it or not?
Two reasons. One was a recommendation from the current marine enforcement officer on the water that was reiterated to us last meeting by the chief. And the second one was in response to a township resident who had a concern and you heard her talk today about that. So we offered to put it on the agenda to discuss.
Okay, but then we haven't had an accident per se.
There's been 2 accidents this summer that was reiterated by the police. But as Mr. S3,
I believe 3.
I'm only aware of 2. The 2 I'm aware of actually wouldn't be affected by any change in the no wake stuff. So, and it's also, I think, in response to the fact that we understand now that we've done the data gathering on the harbor plan, how much additional traffic there is between 20 years ago when we last revamped this plan. So.
Thank you.
Any
Yes,
Just a quick question. How are we currently educating people on the two-way zone?
it's marked on all the buoys, it's marked on all of our maps, and the police folks go out there and talk about it too.
But I don't think people understand the significance of the two different zones. And so my thought is what are we doing either via social media to get the word out, or again, my husband's the main voter here. And by the way, my name is Sherry Hansen. But so I'm in the learning process, but I understand the two-way zone just because of him. But there are so many people out there that don't understand the significance of it. And I think if there was a way we could get the word out and educate people, I just asked Nancy if people had to get permits, like for example, to launch their boats, their kayaks and things like that. That could be an opportunity, or if there's information down at the harbor master. We gotta,
Actually, both of those things happen.
okay, because I didn't know,
But
so
that
that's why
doesn't
I'm
mean we
asking.
couldn't do a better job of trying to get the word out.
I think that's key, because I know we yelled at people while we're out there saying, you need to slow down. This is a no wake zone. And, oh, okay. So, and I understand we have a lot of visitors.
Part of the problem is you don't need a license to run a boat.
I know, yeah,
A lot
I
of
know.
folks just get out of it.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Really, in the area where you first come in the harbor, it's not so much the wakes, it's the speed.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm out there in my little 22-foot boat and my kayaks and my paddle boards, and the speed of the water skiers and the speed of boats looking back to the launch ramp. It's very hard for Dean, I would think. So I help him sometimes, but it's not the big boats. They know to go no way. They come in and they already know because they need to do that. But when you have a boat that's maybe 25 and then you have one that's 27, no, you're on the line there of who to call, and Dean does go and pull them over, because I see him all the time with the blue lights going. So he is doing that, and it might be education, it might be enforcement, ticket or telling them. But the speed factor in there is really discerning, because when I see a little head bobbing after a water skier drops, as soon as I'm out there, I can be going fast. I never do, because I'm worried about the tubers falling off, about the water skiers falling off, about the personal watercraft. So I'm usually doing that, but not everybody does. So it's really that speed in that area. And I would be fine with if you guys want to discuss this next year, but it's really that speed. And Greg, with our increased uses, part of your harbor plan was safety and speed control, balanced use, and environmental impacts. And all of those would be helped if we didn't have high speeds in that area. And so that's why I brought it up. And I appreciate you all talking about it. Thank you very much, but I'm gonna keep pushing for it. I'll be here next year, pushing again, and I'll just be like a little thorn in your side. So thank you very much for the consideration.
Michael's gonna hit you.
I just wanted to add, educationally, MBIA as well as the Wake Surfing Association, they put out a tremendous amount of information that's free. So even if the officer wanted to hand him a thumb drive, there's ways that that information can get provided. And on the maps, which I do think a map over by the kayak area might be useful. But potentially you could also add a preferred kayak route, because honestly, if kayaks didn't go directly across the harbor and went at an angle or something, it's just safer for any boat. It doesn't even matter if it's a kayak.
They stayed in the no wake area, which they can do from Fort Park all the way around to the point instead of going directly.
But a little orange line might help.
And that's something we have already worked with the outfitter who does the rentals down there. So we're gonna check in there. Appreciate all the feedback on that. I would like to move. Are there any-
I just want to just pursue more on the education side of it, if we can work together with a small group of people and talk about how we can get the word out more clearly, through Harbor Light or, programs relevant to spring and summer, so people understand what the issues are and they need to pay attention, especially if we're going to have a full-time patrol person out there, hopefully. I think people want to know about it, why we justified hiring somebody to do this. So somehow we got to get the word out. Yeah.
Keith?
Not to solve it here, but most people buy they're visitors, they buy either a day pass at Ford Park or a season pass. There could be just a quick one line. Please be aware or make yourself aware of the wake zones. You know, it could be as simple as that, or for your concierge service, you know, making sure that your clients are aware of the wake zones.
We provide that map to all of our customers. It's
Yeah,
on
I'm
the
just
city
saying
website.
that for the visitors that don't get Harbor Light, they all have to have a day pass or a season pass. And maybe you put.
We can certainly charge staff to step up that in. To keep moving, I'd like to move that we recommend council, and chief, you just walked in on this, so sit down. That the city hire a full-time seasonal marine patrol officer between the period of mid-June to mid-September, so that we can step up enforcement and education on the water.
And I apologize, I'm the only one working and we had a smoke in the house down on Glen Drive, so I had to go down there. So, I just got back. So I talked to Dean, because I heard this was gonna be an agenda item. I talked to Dean last night at length, and that's in, over the last year, we've struggled because we try to keep up with staff and training. And the people that we can put, the officers on the water over, like, compared to when I started, we had more officers available to run the water. Right now, the staff that I have, I'm more confident in putting them on the water during the weekdays. And so I feel that that's part of our responsibility, so that we could step this, I mean, it's up to you guys, and we can add it, but I think that we can put a uniformed officer on the water more frequently than we have this, especially this past year. I lost Steve, I lost Matt Peter, Dave Peter, Lyle, all people who can drive that boat. I have since replaced them with the guy who's working the night with me at 6. Spencer Bishop. He's on a dive team out of Grand Traverse County. He's adequate and operate that boat. Officer Strobel is adequate. Officer Johnson is. So I think that we could do our part as well to try to beef up or step up that lack time when Dean's not out there to give more education. I'm just throwing that out there. Sorry, I missed the first part of it, but I strongly feel that we can provide patrol with the staff that we have. Maybe not full time, but definitely more than we did this last year. We were struggling this last year. And but I feel like I get a good crew right now that can drive that boat.
I understand that and we appreciate the effort. I think what I'm looking for to have happen out there next year is a commitment, so that we have somebody whose job is that doesn't get pulled back if something else happens on it. And if you can put more guys on outside of that during busy times when it makes sense, not at 8 o'clock at night when it's quiet, then I'm all for that. But I would think it'd be a lot easier to accomplish what we're looking to accomplish in the harbor if we had somebody dedicated to that.
Because Dean reminded me back in the late 80s when we had a full-time marine officer and he wrote like 150 tickets, and Dean said it took us a long time to recoup from that negative publicity. So
Well, to Bill's point, there's a balance on this, but nothing will happen if we don't get somebody on the water that is committed to go there, that you don't have to pull off and do something else at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when otherwise he would be there. So that's why I would like to move that we recommend to city council that we hire a full-time seasonal marine patrol officer who's dedicated to the harbor 40 hours a week during a 3-month period between mid-June and mid-September or so, and to be paid for out of waterfront funds. So that's a motion. Is there a second for that?
That's a motion. I'd make a second. Sure. I think it's a good idea.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion at the table? Rachel, you want to do, or you're still struggling on, right now you're in mid-September, aren't you?
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jeffrey James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Karen Stone.
Yes.
Perfect. Chief Everest. Laura.
Yes.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. Really appreciate input on this. We'll all be smarter about this next year, and we'll take another look at it then. Next item, Mr. Walsh has a concept you'd like to
Yeah.
recognize.
Well, I'll try not to take a lot of time here. But I have an idea, and you won't offend me if you don't think it's a good idea. So it is a fresh idea. Yeah, well, first slide. So I was walking down the waterfront this summer in Mackinac City. And they've done a nice job of improving the water. I was walking down and I noticed these small little parks and sand. And I started thinking about our waterfront. And then Sue Stewart, she stopped me this summer and said, you know, you've got kids swimming off the hay dock. And thought, oh, geez. Wonder if it's signed. So I walked down the day dock and I looked and I didn't see a sign, but I started looking at that area. There's about 200 feet from the day dock to Gardner. And can you pull the next one up? So I looked at this area and I saw the sand and I thought, hey, you know, we've got the beginnings of a sandy area. Could we improve that, enhance it, make more sand? Now we do have dinghies that come up close to the beach that have moorings. So could you go to the next slide? So there's about 200 feet there, and of which I'm looking at from the day dock over about halfway. We've got about 100 feet of area that's kind of like not being utilized, you know, it's just rock. And it's clear, open, you know. So I thought, well, what are we gonna do with the dinghies on the day dock? But there seems to be enough dock going out, so we could relocate the dinghies on the east side to the south. So the next slide.
I'm sorry, Warren, I didn't
Yeah.
understand it. The dinghies on the east side that are there now would move further south on that dock toward the T?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out logistically if it's possible to, because if we do make that more of a beach area, people are gonna feel a little funny if dinghies are coming up closer. So I'm thinking, well, if we could move the dinghies south, it would give that area, it'd be more open. Okay, so the next slide.
And then we would reduce the amount of 2-hour dock traffic.
If that happens, yeah, if that happens.
Okay.
But just for the sake of argument right now, okay? So I started looking at that area and I was thinking, well, what would happen if we would take that area that's kind of beachy right now and make it more beachy, add more sand, and then continue to the east around that elm, willow. We wouldn't have to take the willow necessarily. Because people that are on a beach like to have shade, you know? So, let's go to the next slide. That's a close-up that shows what we've got here. It's, we don't have a lot of depth. So, and there is a water outfall from the garden area because there's a fountain there. There's a spring. So we have an outfall that could be relocated. Next slide. We do have the makings of kind of a sandy area. Go to the next one. Then looking west, and this is where we had some erosion with high water. So we have to be concerned about that. So we would have to develop it. If we wanted to add more sand, we'd have to remove the rocks, but we'd also have to go up, I'm saying, a little ways and still create somewhat of a rock area for erosion. Otherwise, we could have some erosion. So we have to address that. Next slide.
Are people on Zoom seeing the slides? I am not.
Yeah, let me see. Try. Share.
I also can't see them.
Can you see them now?
Thank you.
I can, okay.
Yeah. So
If you
this
could-
is an area that you could make it more like this, where you see you've got it's a little prettier, you've got a little more sand, both up on the beach and down in the water. And it doesn't have to be real deep, because we don't have a lot of depth there, and we don't want to cut into the garden area, where people like to sit. That's where people go and sit on grass and have lunch, picnic and stuff like that. So we don't want to take away from that. But when you think about it, if people that are out there on their mooring and they come in with their dinghy, sometimes if it's a nice day, they want to swim. So they might jump in the water on their boat, but they also might come in their dinghy and they might tie their dinghy up and they might walk in and they might just wade in right there, you know? So let's go to the next slide. When I was a kid, yeah, I don't know what that is.
That's beach.
I really loved the little harbor club pool. I'd walk by it and I knew I could never swim in that pool.
Come on.
But I always walked by it and I thought, "Guys, that would be great." You know what that says to me though? It says that, gee, I like to look at sand, I like to look at water, I like to look at beach more than I like to look at rock. It's just prettier. It's just nicer. Even though I may never swim, it's still an enhancement. That's why I think it's worth considering. Even though you're not saying, okay, this is a beach to swim in, it is an enhancement of what we've got because sand is prettier than rock. And basically, that's the idea.
Has this gone to the Parks Committee?
We decided it was best to come to the Harbor Commission first. Because it does deal with the water and it's gonna deal with the dock, so I didn't feel comfortable bringing it to Parks before it came here.
Because that's ultimately what we're talking about here, is a
Yeah.
change in how that park.
And he had
works.
one meeting left for the year, so it didn't really make sense.
So go back to the slide before that. So that's kind of the idea, is something that would look more like that. Yeah.
How many linear?
Can you go
feet?
back to the very first slide, or were there only two?
Yeah, I'll go through all.
Okay.
I paced off, it's around 200 feet from Gardner to the day dock.
And how much
Okay.
more is that than what we have now with this little sandy area that we do have by the dinghies?
The little sandy that you got there right now is, you know, roughly 60 feet.
It'll
50
be
feet.
Triple that, basically.
So maybe double it. Yeah.
Would we have a designated swim area? I mean, like we do at the dog beach?
If it got down to, if it was developed to that point where we put sand in there and people found that it was another alternative rather than the dog, Zoll or Zorn, that they decided, well, they're right there, maybe I'll just wait in here, you know? And if they want to swim, maybe at that point, maybe we add, you know, some buoy line.
I would think we would have to have some kind of buoys or markers to keep other boats, dinghies coming in too close. So people would be aware there are people
Mhm.
swimming and waiting there. Do you have any idea of cost at all?
No. But
Well, let's get through the concept first
Yeah.
before we, even go down that road on it. And we will need to deal with it from the harbor side, and then we'll let the parks chime in on the other and go from there with it. I'm all for access to the water. There's no doubt about that. But we've got stuff, we have motorized dinghies by that 2-hour dock that are used by mooring holders.
right.
And that's the only place we can put them, because we don't allow them down in Zoll Street because it is a beach for swimming, both dogs and people. And what frightens me about this right off the bat is we don't have any other place to put those dinghies. And we're gonna have motorized traffic going in and out of there. That is not a good mix in my mind.
Well, when Sue said, do you know that we've got kids swimming off the day dock? And I know that it's not a good idea to swim around boats. I said, well, maybe we should go look at that. And instead of saying, no, you can't swim off the day dock, I'm always a believer in, well, if you can't do that, but here's what you can do. So let's just say you can't swim off the dock, but here's a place you can swim. Now go back to the slide that shows the dock. And let's just see what we've got. I've been down there and I've never seen that dock full, totally packed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God. Boy.
Okay,
That's the
All the
busiest
way.
dock in town.
Weekend.
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I looked at going to the west in front of the harbor master's office. Is it possible that we could put the dinghies closer to the harbor master? Is there an area in there that we could put another float that goes out for more dinghies? I don't know.
let's back up for a second. We have boats that come off of our pump out dock that back into that area right in front of the harbor master's office. It's close to the 2-hour dock.
Okay,
So moving over there would be a problem. But this whole thing was predicated on kids jumping off the bay dock,
no, that kind of got me to go down there to look at it.
because
But
that's
what-
something we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
And you're right, there isn't a sign there. I don't know, there used to be one. I don't know where
There did.
it got to.
Yeah.
But we can certainly, staff
Yeah.
can certainly do a better.
having the waterfront at the total water park and the dog beach. I mean, we've done a great job with our waterfront, making it the very, very best we can. But I always look at it and continue to look at it to say, well, how can we even make it better? That's all. And there's a dead spot there. You can't really do much at Fort Park, but there's a dead spot in there somewhere. Now, maybe you don't do it close to the day dock, maybe you move it down. Because you got 200 feet.
There's some other shareholders that would want to weigh in on this. Little Traverse Sailors run their
Yeah.
bug boating stuff in that very area. And I certainly would want to send those kids out into the mooring field or into the middle of the harbor to do those lessons. And that would stop that. My other concerns would be, it will turn into a beach if we make it a beach, and people will be swimming there. And that's going to cause traffic problems, bike problems in the harbor master lot, which is supposed to be at some level used for boaters on it, saying now we're gonna turn it into a beach parking lot, which would be a problem. So I see some issues from my perspective on expanding that kind of stuff down there.
I always look at, instead of how it can't be done, I always look at how it can be done.
No problem with that. You can't put a square peg in a round hole. Does everybody else think?
My first concern is actually the parking also. I liked your last picture, or second to last picture, it really could be more beautiful and you could move that rock deal back a little bit probably. It's a very popular place for people to go down and have a picnic and all that kind of stuff. Huge, actually. It's attractive. Probably needs to be massaged and thought about a lot.
Well, it's already, as you say, highly used by picnickers. That are close to the water, they like the shade from that trees. I think that area fills up with sandwich people, lunch people, or whatever, quicker than it does over in the old park. So I'm reluctant to go in there and really. The other thing we have is there's a significant amount of erosion that happens. We've had to replenish the sand west of the 2-hour dock several times on that. And if we open it up more down the other way, we're setting ourselves up for more high maintenance to keep the sand on that beach, because that stuff migrates like crazy.
What did the old sign say? Did it say no jumping off the dock or no
Pretty
swimming?
much the same thing the other signs on the west and east dock say, no swimming or diving.
I'm wondering if we can make something more out of that space that's somewhat sandy closest to Harbor Master's office. I find myself going in there in my paddleboard from time to time. Getting off the board, but I'm walking through rock and so on. Now, what you said about erosion might be an issue, but maybe we could make that more into a little deeper sandy area without extending it any further to the east and not getting it any closer to dock there. It might be worth looking at.
Again, I'm all for doing whatever we can to get people to the water, but I don't think we ought to be putting more activity in an area where we're backing exposed propellers into where you're making something look more usable to a member of the general public. We're asking for trouble there.
But I'm not suggesting that people would use it so much, from the land to the water as much as just making it more sand, user friendly for people that are wading in that area. Because it is fairly rocky right there. So it might be worth taking a look at a little bit more closely, I think.
To the
Right,
west
that
of the
was
courtesy
safety.
dock?
To the east,
To the east.
Yeah,
Okay.
right,
between the courtesy dock and the will.
right.
Rock under the water.
I think it's a good idea myself.
Pardon me?
I think it's a good idea.
It's a good idea too. I do worry about the safety issues. With
Yeah,
all the,
everywhere, everywhere.
it's so congested.
Well, we've set the city up so that the beach has its parking, its bathrooms, its park area, pretty much. And Zoll Street has, with the advent of the improvement down there, better parking lot. For that. And here and we've managed to keep motorized vehicles away from people in all of those spots. And that's not by chance, that was by design. And here we're asking to commingle this in an area that sees a lot of traffic to begin with. And I struggle with that.
But they're already kind of using it as a little bit of a beach anyway.
I don't see people sitting on beach chairs on that. And if we went in and improved it,
It's not deep enough for that.
that
They're on
could
the
happen.
grass. Yeah.
I mean,
You ever see people having picnics and such to the east of the willow tree and then coming over here and then walking in and swimming off of that little beach?
not much. There's a touch. There's some dog, but not much. Most of it goes down to Zoll Street. So what you've heard some concerns. I think what I've heard at this table is it'd be nice if we could do something nice down there, but we have to make sure we address the issues of, Michael, you haven't weighed in on this either. I mean, you see this as much as anybody.
My biggest concern is what do we do with those 15 or 20 boats that end up on the east side of the dock that are mooring holders and have seasonal dinghy permits? Where do those boats go? They can't go to the south because that dock gets heavily used on both sides at the worst of times. And then there's no room for them at Ford Park. We don't allow motorized dinghies down at Zoll Street. So where do those 15 or 20 dinghies end up going?
I don't think moving the dinghies to the south is even something we can do. We need the space we have, and I would not want to displace the day dock because we need every foot we have on that. That helps feed every business in town. So moving those boats is a stopper in my book. But if we leave the dinghies where they are, because we have to be true to what that dock is for, then we have the issue of putting an engine that close to some little kid that's walking around on the beach.
It's a big issue about safety for sure.
And I'm not worried about the adults, but too many kids get down there. Some little kid goes over, he's climbing around the back of that boat and it's on a sharp propeller. That's why we don't have those activities sitting next to motorized type stuff.
No, most of the things go kind of straight out from there.
Pardon me?
Most of them probably go straight out to the mooring field.
Depends on the wind direction. Oh, you mean as far as heading out to their boats?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part.
We don't go over towards Everson's.
If it's a matter of beautification to Ward's point in his last slide picture, would a couple Adirondack chairs there solve that without changing anything? Or do picnickers bring all their own chairs and blankets and everything else?
There's a couple picnic tables down there, Greg.
I can't see them in the picture, but
No, you cannot.
There's a half dozen tables.
Yeah, there's quite a
Yeah.
few. My concern is if we made it look more like a beach, it's gonna get used like a beach, and we're gonna drive beach people down there, not boaters. And that, I think we're headed for trouble doing that.
Parking alone's a huge concern.
So you've heard support for the concept, but some concern for how. we
Yeah, well, I
make it
don't think
happen.
it's a secret that everyone wants more beach. But yeah, it's a logistics issue. And like I said, I wasn't gonna bring it to the Parks Board I don't have any issue with it from a park standpoint. Obviously, we wouldn't highlight it as a public beach, but people will use it if it's there. Yeah, I don't know enough boats or about usage to judge on safety or anything for that or where they would go, so. Again, there are small changes we can make, like we could move that water line or we could beautify those rocks. We could even add a little bit of sand and say it's not a beach, but you're beautifying something, you know, in a small way. So,
Well, that would kind of, the beautification part of it is.
right, yeah.
The park side of that thing. And, but I don't see how we can change where those dinghies are. The uses we have on that 2-hour dock are pretty fixed and they're very necessary.
So I could take it to the Parks Board as small beautification changes and see for the spring or summer how usage would change. You know, and then if we see if those small beautifications have made that section more popular and it becomes, you know, an issue, someone would know. But I mean, to haul in sand and create a beach, you know, we wouldn't want to do any of those drastic changes until those dinghies were removed.
And I don't see where we take those dinghies. And believe me, I'd love to have another beach in town. That's not it. But this would be a challenge.
The rock side, I just haven't done the, over there where the rocks are. Ward, were you saying move those back for erosion and then that would be beach? Are there any dinghies over there?
No.
Or-
No.
No, so that's, did the dinghies ever go over, sorry, pardon my confusion, but do they ever go, so technically that could be,
But what you'll run into over there,
Yeah.
Rachel, that's the narrowest part of it.
okay,
The beach we have right now is 30 or 40% further away from Bay Street. As the
Okay.
stuff with the rocks, it gets quite skinny down there.
okay,
And the other thing that will happen is whenever you go to build down there, when you move the rocks back, if you want to leave 20 feet of beach
Mhm.
in a high water year, that's going to be gone.
yeah,
And then you've eliminated more park space and you can't use the beach space.
okay, good point.
And there is erosion that happens down there regularly. We know it because we've had to put sheet pile in on the west side of that and haul sand in to take care of the east side. So I think you heard feedback and that's maybe what we were looking for tonight on this. Any other comments on Ward's idea? And Ward, very much appreciate you thinking outside the box. It's cool.
We could also talk about it at our joint meeting between Harbor Commission and Parks in spring.
Are we doing that again?
Yes, we are.
Is it your turn to bring pizza? I'm trying to remember.
And beer.
Sounds good. So, all right, let's move on to setting rates for the 2023 season. So we still got work to do. In your packet, there's a page titled 2022 seasonal dock rates and other charges. List the rates that we currently have for dock slips, moorings, transient moorings, launch ramp permits, dinghy storage, kayak storage, commercial launch permits, and parking pass down at the harbor master building. Those are the rates that we have. Now let's tackle seasonal dock slips first. There's a handout, and that's the page right there. Karen, Chip, you've got it. Chip's got his, Tom's got his. That compares this year's slip lengths in Harbor Springs with 3 other neighboring public marinas for the cost. And it also compares to Irish and Wallstrom's here in town as private marinas and in Bay Harbor as a public marina.
And I think there's a waiting list for these.
Yes, there is.
Big times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although Bay Harbor, I think, has space. I
They
think
just built that new dock.
Further.
so. They're actively looking.
Okay.
Everybody else is not on that. The goal here has always been to try and find some balance between what the private marinas charge and what the public marinas charge. Because we have always tried to be higher than the other public marinas because we think we are worth it. But we also think we don't offer the services that Irish's and Wallstrom's do with security and parking for their customers and access to mechanics and techs that are there right on site. And I think you can see from here, no matter what category of dock it is, that we're about 20 to 25% higher than the other public marinas and about 20 to 25% lower than most of the private stuff in there. And that has seemed to be a relative sweet spot in there.
I mean, to interrupt you, I think Kyle's.
I
I'm sorry.
I have to go on a call. Do you have anything for me?
No,
Anybody?
Goodbye.
I think we're great. Thanks, tell the Marine Patrol, thank you for the work this year.
Yep, then we'll get together, hopefully they'll approve it.
Tell them they can deputize me as they meeting.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I'll be back maybe. All right.
Lisa, don't say that. Kenny Biddick and I went to that
Yeah, I'll
school
be
that
out
did
there. I
that.
tell them on the radio already.
And that might be exactly the kind of person we're looking for. But at any rate, back to this. So it seems like we're in a reasonable position for where we are on seasonals. And as a reminder, the state requires we charge a minimum, which we're well above, for seasonals and a maximum for transient rates. So we can go where we want. So the question is, what do we do this year with rates? I mean,
Our costs have certainly gone up with inflation, but the cost of fuel probably dampened desire for people to vote. So,
it has slowed down boat traffic. So
yeah.
And didn't we raise these last year?
yes, we have pretty well traditionally raised with inflation.
Ouch.
We did 3% for this year. We did 3% the prior year. We're looking at the minutes, what was approved for that rate increase for both the transient and the seasonal.
And we've been close to inflation, if not at it. There have been years we've only done a point. There's been years where we didn't raise when we were the 08 to 11 recession, and I'm glad we didn't because we managed to keep all of our seasonal boaters and we're still full. So there's a balance.
How many are on the waiting list?
1 million.
If there's 1 million on the waiting list, I'd raise it. We won't lose anybody.
How many?
172.
Now, remember that waiting list, probably Michael's waiting list and probably has the same names on it as our waiting list, but there certainly is more demand than there is space.
Our revenues were flat this year.
Yes, probably true.
Yep.
Yeah.
The third page.
Do we have a projection of cost increases next year at this point? Is it too early to know?
Cost increases,
Running the harbor master's office.
we haven't set that budget yet.
Yeah, that actually happens in the later of the thing. But you can rest assured things are going up.
Definitely.
There's no doubt.
In every possible category.
So we have to make some kind of adjustment.
If we feel pretty good that it's gonna go up next year, which I certainly would agree with, and we had less people, but the revenue is flat, and we raised it last year,
Now, that's for transients.
well, I understand, but why would we not keep it pretty close to what it is, what we have right now through next year?
You keep it the same?
Keep it the same.
We're talking about seasonal people here, not transients, right?
Right.
And they're gonna park their boat here, even if they don't drive it.
Right.
I think we should raise it by, I think we need to keep up with the costs side of it.
Yeah, I would check Chip's motion. As soon as we go flat and inflation goes up, we're gonna have to play catch up. So
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm an inflation kind of guy, and right now inflation's at 8.26%. So that's a number to think about. Maybe we don't need to go that high, maybe we need to go a little higher. I think inflation's gonna keep going up. But I'm not afraid to look at that kind of a jump.
JB, how did we end up with the 35 and 40 foot slips being the same price?
Because we don't have any 35-foot slips. We still carry that category. And some other marinas did.
Good question, good.
But I'm glad you're reading the paper, Tom. That's good.
I just can't remember anything.
I have some concern about raising it so much that it would discourage people from coming or keeping their dockage, because everybody's cost is going up, not just our cost of operations, but everybody's costs are going up. Fuel costs continue to escalate. Maybe the people who have their seasonal slips and moorings doesn't matter to them. But I would be concerned about going too high. 3% may not be enough for this year, but we've been at 3% and nobody seems to it doesn't seem to matter to people that much. 8% may be a little.
How many people would you lose if you raise it 5 or 10%?
Honestly, Tom, I don't think we lose anybody because slips are in such high demand.
That'd be
I
my
think
guess
Bill's
too.
comment is right on the money.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing at the table is we all agree there needs to be an increase. So then let's just start this out. I'll move that we raise seasonal rates for dockage across the board 8%. And let's see if we get a second.
I get a second. I'll second that.
Okay. Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
What's Irish doing this year?
They're
We
going
don't set
down.
our rates until later.
You already said
And I can
you're
only imagine they'll increase slightly.
gonna raise them until people quit renting.
If you raise prices, you could lose someone, but I think as Mike said, in this environment,
We
not
gonna
because
lose-
you're substantially below market rates, so it's still gonna be.
Well, we're below private rate of rates. We're
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying.
we're well above other public rates, and that's important.
Well, we're better town than those other ones.
Well, we're talking about hiring a policeman, all that stuff. I'm certainly good for compromise, so let's go 8.
So we have a motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Let's see if this flies. Rachel, would you do a roll call vote?
I'm great.
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Francois,
No,
Chip Evers.
Yes. Okay,
Bill Brown.
Yes.
excellent. Takes care of that for the seasonal side of it. Moorings. I would, if it were up to me, I'd handle them the same way as the docks. We have waiting lists all the way across on that too.
We had 1,000,001 on the points waiting list.
Yes, they're substantial on them. We have demand all the way across.
I would agree with you.
Yeah, 8%. I would propose that we raise them the same as we raised the other.
Yeah, supply and demand kind of dictates.
Is that a motion, Bill?
That's a motion.
That's a second.
And Jeff seconded. Any further discussion? Rachel, you want to do another? You need a new pencil?
Tom Graham.
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Francois,
I'm okay. Yes, I'm okay with the mooring part of it.
Chip Evers,
Yes.
and Bill Brown.
Yes.
Great. Launch ramp permits.
These are a little bit more elastic, right? I mean, these are more price sensitive people.
Pardon me,
And the launch people are more price sensitive
the launch ramp permits?
versus the seasonal folks.
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
No.
Michael, what are other marinas charging? I didn't even think about that.
Petoskey's at the same daily rate. They don't offer a seasonal permit for non-residents that we do. They do offer a seasonal permit basically for our entire viewing area, so. But I don't know what they charge for their seasonal permit. I have the feeling that it's pretty much in line with ours, what we charge. Yeah.
What's their daily?
Their daily rate's the same as ours.
Is it 5?
Yeah.
That is, the $5 thing has been a pretty well there for a long time.
Yep.
You can afford gas, you can afford $5.
Oh, yeah.
Use a lot.
Any suggestions from anybody?
I would,
We've been at the $5.
Yeah, we
How
do.
long we have been there? How long we have been at these rates?
I don't know,
Since
but I
Nancy
think
Cooper's
it's
harbor
been
master,
a
yeah.
few years.
That's a long time.
It's probably in here, but what kind of revenue do we get off the daily one?
The daily, I think that it's in your,
I think it's in there, but I didn't. I
the
couldn't find
numbers.
it.
it's the total launch rate is what we have in here, not
Not
broken
it
out.
doesn't break it out that way.
The daily launch ramp, was a little bit over $6,000. A little bit over 6.
A little over 6.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yeah, I did combine those two.
So a 10% increase would be 600, wouldn't even move the needle. So
Yeah,
I was, I think from a appearances perspective, we wouldn't not raise it. Goodbye.
The seasonal resident rates and.
No, the launch
The
rate,
daily, okay.
the daily.
Haven't we talked about putting somebody full-time down at Ford Park in the high usage months?
You've been talking about
MJ.
automating
Right.
Mary
Okay,
Jane because
right.
she's slowing down, and I think Michael has a plan for that.
Yep, we do have a plan for that for next year.
Would
Yeah.
that cost more money than what we've been paying her?
Pardon me?
Would that cost more money than we've been paying her?
I guess we'd have to negotiate with the person who's interested. We'd have to come up with that number to satisfy his requirements, but the gentleman who's interested has, spent several years observing what goes on at the launch ramp and has voiced his own concerns, and I think it'd be a good addition to them to make things happen down there.
So do you think it'd be fair to raise the rates accordingly then?
As far as seasonals or daily rates?
Both seasonal and daily.
That's a question for you. Yeah, really a question for you.
I think it would be reasonable to raise the rates some.
I was just talking about the daily rate of $5. I mean, we're it's such a long waiting list to get a dock slip or a mooring. We want to encourage local people to bring their boats in. I mean, from 5 to, if you have an 8% increase, it's 40 cents, $5.40, that kind of thing, it just doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
No,
And the other thing we gotta think about is that's a $5 bill in that envelope down.
right,
Like that's gonna have a $5,
Right.
$2,
Right.
or $7.
Right.
it didn't even move the needle, so.
Yeah. The other thing I like about Fort Park is it allows anybody with a dinghy or a canoe or whatever, if they need to use that ramp, it could be a little kid, it could be anybody in that. And they've got access to the water on it.
Yeah.
So I'm not as wound up about these numbers as I am the other ones that generate some real revenue.
I agree.
So I would move, we leave the launch ramp permits the same, both daily and seasonal.
I would agree and second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? We'll see if this flies.
What percent of the people think you missed on there? There's no one's there.
Did we miss down there?
The daily launch.
Percentage wise?
I think a lot of people.
Boy, Tom, I think so. People are so honest on their way. People come down to us saying, where are the envelopes? Because they can't see them. That's honest with people. And I honestly think that the percentage would be minimal, totally minimal.
I guess that'd be a lot higher than that.
People are super honest about that. Yeah.
Those ice boaters you gotta go after, they don't pay the $5.
It's not right.
They don't need to, we don't put them in the water.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Rachel, you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jeff Davis,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Karen Stroud,
Yes.
Chip Evers.
Yes.
Bill Brown.
Yes.
Great. Transient moorings. Anybody excited about doing anything with that? Michael, do those numbers bother anybody? I mean, it's $25 a night to keep a 6,000-pound boat's pretty cheap in any town.
No.
When you gotta go out to the mooring.
And 35 for a Catalina and 42 doesn't make any difference to those guys. So, yeah.
So if we took a $5 jump on both, does that make?
Nope, I don't think so.
When was the last time these were raised?
I think they
I
were,
want to say 3 years ago.
Oh.
Yeah.
yeah,
30 and 40.
those Anybody have any ideas?
Pretty
I'll
cheap
jump in
day,
on
I
it.
think.
Pardon me?
Cheap. It's pretty cheap for a night.
I wouldn't have any trouble going up $5 each.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that.
You want to make a motion?
I'd make a motion that we increase from $25 to $30 on the smaller boats, and on the big boats go 35 to 40.
I second that.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Rachel, you want to do a vote, please?
Tom Graham.
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Karen Stroud,
Yes.
Chip Evers,
Yes.
Bill Brown.
Yes. Great. Down to the last few on this page. Dinghy storage for seasonal mooring holders is $50 and $200 for non-seasonal dinghy storage, and that's only if you have space.
Mhm.
That's correct. Personally, not Nick, but we get a reasonable amount of money for that seasonal mooring. Not everybody gets out to the boat with a separate dinghy to get there. Otherwise, I'd say we should include it in the mooring price, but some people have boats at Michael's place or Wallstrom's place and they get out to the mooring that way. So that's why there's the extra $50 in that, but I wouldn't want to go any higher only because we're already charging a reasonable amount out on the mooring itself. Does that make sense to everybody? Then the $200 per season, non-seasonal, how many of those did you sell, Michael?
$2,100 worth.
2200.
21, I was gonna say.
2200.
It has to be individual.
So you had room for 11 there.
Mhm.
And were they all here or were they all, or excuse me, all by?
Quite a few of them have gone to Fort Park.
We're talking about 11 sales.
Yeah, exactly.
We also had an issue this year with the water going down as much as it did. We lost probably almost 40 feet worth of space at Courtesy with the Courtesy dock and also down at Fort Park. Accessibility as far as water depth went, so.
The way this works, so everybody understands it, the needs of mooring holders to have their own dinghy changes yearly, depending on the boat, what their particular circumstance is. So some years you may need more space at the dock because you have more people on moorings. Other years you have open spots. The theory was we would sell those open spots when we had them, fill the dock up to the limit of the dock and then go from there. And the mooring holder has to decide by 1st of May or something what they're doing. I don't know what it
It has to
says.
be sent in with their contract by February 1. Yeah.
So then you know what's going on there.
Yep.
So I like what we're doing with it. Is $200 enough to put a dinghy on that dock or should we be a little more?
There's only 11. Let's keep it like it is, make it simple.
I would say if we're increasing the rates for the mooring holders and the seasonal dock people, we ought to do a little more for guys keeping his dinghy at the dock. It's the same kind of thing. Whether you go to 220 or 210 or pick a number, but just share the pain across the board.
We just jacked up their prices by 8%, you know, for the
Right.
seasonals, which I think is pretty high.
We don't really use it in services. We don't get electric or water. We don't use it in service without our watch. We're just, oh,
And you're talking $150, $165 a year, for 215.
And we could probably put kayak storage in with that same category on that at 200.
How long is that list?
The kayak list,
Mhm.
47 names.
and it just went up, what, 2 years ago? From 100 to 200, or was it last year?
I think it was at least 2 years ago.
I think it was 2 years ago.
Just 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, I would move just to keep this moving that we leave the $50 seasonal mooring holder rate the same. And we increase the rate for non-seasonal dinghy storage and kayak storage from $200 each to $215 each.
What's that based on?
Wild guess, guess.
It's an 8% inflation rate.
It's about the same rate we did everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Certainly livable.
Is there a second on that?
That's second.
So the motions are made, seconded. Any further discussion? Rachel?
Rachel's asked the question, does that include kayak storage as well?
Yes, that was part of the motion.
Okay.
Was
I'm sorry, yep.
Dinghy storage stays the same for seasonal mooring holders, goes to $215 for non-seasonal dinghy storage and kayak storage.
Okay.
Tom
Thank you.
Graham,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes,
Aaron Strong,
Yes.
Chip Evers,
Yes.
Bill Brown.
great, thanks. Now on to a couple of fun ones. Launch permits for commercial city businesses down there, which are we have Walstroms and Irish, obviously, Michael. Who else is a city business?
Terry Meyer.
Terry Meyer and 45 North.
You sell 4 of those in there. And right now, Michael, are your valet folks, do they have a launch ramp permit, seasonal launch ramp permit already? Or you don't check for that? You just launch the boat? Because there's
We
been
don't
some
check on
comments on
that,
that.
so I'm gonna assume that no, they don't have any reason to have one.
How many you launch on a good day down there?
You're busy.
I don't know what a good day is. So on the busiest day of the year, we have 23 boats in the programs. On the busiest day of the year, we launch 15 and retrieve them. So it's 2 ways. And literally, that's the busiest day of the year. Most days we do, I don't know, 5 or 6 boats a day.
Right, I'm on 23, but okay, thank you.
So the first thing I think we need to talk about here is an explanation of why he's able to launch those boats without that permit. And that really was in reaction to the political climate at the council a number of years ago, where they wanted to help the 2 different private marinas. There was, if I remember right, it was a debate about how much property tax they were paying, and this was some minor olive branch that council put out to make that happen. And I think we need to change that. So the first thing I would do is require everybody that uses Ford Park to have either a daily ticket or a seasonal ticket, which would require your folks who are using your service to buy a seasonal.
Tickets for the vehicle.
Pardon me?
The tickets for the vehicle, right? It doesn't go on the boat. Ticket goes in the vehicle, a season pass goes in the vehicle.
It does, but it's to launch the boat. You don't have to use the same vehicle to launch the boat, but you have to buy a pass for the boat. So and then we would maybe look at the way we handle the commercial city business and non-commercial city business. That would be a license to operate commercially down there.
Like you have to do the same thing for Wallstrom's and for Terry.
Yeah. So any boat that goes in Ford Park has to have the right permit on it, whether it's a daily one or a seasonal.
Okay, so what's the permit?
He doesn't use the launch ramp. He just uses the grass. Hang on, let me finish with Michael.
We'll have to work out what the permit is, because right now the permit is something that goes in your vehicle. It does not go on the boat.
Oh, I see what
So
you're
I'm just
saying.
saying we have to work out
We
what the
got to
permit.
figure out. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I thought you were talking about something else. Keith, you had
With all due respect, I encourage this council to explore that, to do that. It drives a level of fairness. The businesses provide a service to the customer. We shouldn't be subsidizing those customers. We can figure out whether it's putting some type of tag on the trailer, but clearly you shouldn't have people paying different rates. If you use Ford Park, whether you're going through a commercial business or a private, we all should pay the same amount.
But we don't all pay the same amount, right? So a daily person pays a different amount. A
I
seasonal resident.
understand, but
They still
but
pay.
you-
So we also have to deal with who owns the boat. Is it a resident? Non-resident? What do you want us to do?
If this was going to be easy, like,
No, it's not gonna be easy though. It's gonna get harder outside of us because we have this business, everyone knows about it. You know, you're gonna have, how
I
you
think
gonna
that issue is solvable. You know where these folks live. I mean, you send a bill.
I understand, I do.
Yeah.
There's 4 other permit holders.
Yeah.
And all I'm gonna ask is that we're all treated the same. That's all I'm
That's
asking.
exactly how we would do it.
And just to be clear, that would be per boat.
Yes.
Okay. So for Michael, it's 23 max if you had the same number, but usually 15. Times if you set a seasonal resident rate, it'd be 23 times 35.
If they were all residents, and if a few
Yeah,
aren't,
they're not,
then they
it'd
would
be
pay
23
60.
times 6.
So you just have the two.
I just want to make sure that it's per boat based on whether it's. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean,
So that would be my motion. Is there a second for that?
Explain a little bit further, so that $400 fee would go away and it would just.
No.
only pay so
First, we're dealing with the change that
that they
right
pay-
now allows him to launch all these boats under the commercial permit without having a
Right,
launch permit.
gotcha. The customer-
So I think we need to deal with that first, see if that flies at the table.
Right.
If it does, then that'll affect what we do with the next one. If it doesn't,
Why would there be a next one if he has to do it for every,
pardon me. Right now, when Michael launches a boat over there, that boat doesn't have a launch. permit.
I got that, but he's paid the $400, right?
Michael has, yes.
Right, so what you take away that global permit and he doesn't buy
You don't.
boat. Okay,
I wouldn't take it away because we
Yeah.
still have commercial business operating on public property.
Okay.
And there should be some
yeah, okay.
thing for that. And he charges for that service and that's part of doing business. That's how I would look at it, Jim. So the motion is that we require every boat that launches at Ford Park to have the appropriate permit.
I would move.
Is there a second for that?
I would second it.
Made and seconded. Any further discussion? We can do this without a roll call because there's no dollars involved in it. And it'll save you a thumb. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same for opposed. Motion carries. Now we can get back to launch permits for commercial city businesses at $400 and non-city at $600.
Anybody think we need to do anything with those numbers?
Seemed like that was raised substantially a couple of years ago.
I think we doubled it, if not last year, the year before, 2 years ago.
We've got the launch ramp permits, the cost same. It would seem only fair to keep the commercial city business the same as well. And we're gonna collect the additional revenue by having the boat owner pay for the seasonal resident or non-resident fee for the season. So I don't see a reason to change it.
Is that a motion?
I would move.
I would second that.
So motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I like that.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Mhm.
Do you send seasonal applications to these folks for valet service? Do they sign a contract with you, or
They sign a contract with us.
should we send along an application for seasonal permit along with the
We're gonna have
contract?
to figure out how we do that.
Okay,
Either we absorb it or we just add it to the fee, or this depends on what the city's gonna do.
okay,
Because if you're gonna require a permit for a boat, that means an MC number.
Right.
But me personally, I could own 6 boats and launch 6 boats at the ramp, so I get it's commercial, I'm not arguing with you. But you're changing the whole concept of Ford Park, and if you're changing it just for commercial, that's fine. But then how are we gonna do it? I don't have a problem, I mean, we can get, if that's what's required, we'll get the permits one way or another from them. But we have to know what you want. Okay, because it doesn't exist right now.
Okay, motion's been made to leave the rates the same and seconded. Let's do a roll call vote.
Tom Graham,
Sure, yes.
Yes.
Ken Bartlett,
No.
Karen Strom,
Yes.
Chip Everett,
Yes.
Okay, that passes. It's good. Michael, any reason to change the daily parking pass down there at $10?
No.
Was anybody excited if it's not a big revenue generator, and the reason you're giving that pass out is because they're paying for a permit for their boat at the dock. So permit for the the reason you're issuing a transient daily parking pass to an individual is because they have their transient boat at our
right,
dock.
yes.
So we're already getting the dockage fee on it. So I'm okay with that side. What's left? Transient dock rates. And in our handout, there was a really cool colored sheet. It's on the screen. And it's on the screen, and where we are is the second highest rate in the state, and the state controls how much, what our maximum amount can be on this.
Is this a state generated fee schedule or?
Yes.
We just have to follow under I?
We get to choose
Oh, okay.
which rate we can go to.
Say it again.
The state will not let us charge more than the highest rate here for transients, like in the right-hand column. And we are at this column right here.
Okay.
Now, we certainly saw, everybody saw a change in demand for boat traffic due to fuel prices, probably on that. So, and Michael, what's the state gonna do with these rates for next year? Because this was a 20.
These are the 2023 transient rates up on the screen right now.
And they haven't gone up since last year.
They have not gone up since last year. Last year, they decided they were gonna go with a 3-year cycle, and we happen to be in the second year of a 3-year cycle of them potentially raising rates in 2024. So, but they have stayed the same from last year across the board.
Do we have the choice of moving from I to H or J, or do we?
Yes, we can go up, we can go down, we just can't go higher than J or lower than A.
Well, we know we're not going down.
Yes.
The city of Petoskey uses Schedule F. Charlottesville uses Schedule I. Boyne City uses Schedule I as well, just as a little background.
And that should factor into our thinking. Those are actually our competitors, so to speak. I don't think it should dominate your thinking, but
So they're gonna reset these next year, because that'll be the 3rd year.
Potentially.
Okay.
Who is J?
Sorry?
Who is J?
J is Mackinac Island and the city of Traverse City. in the Mackinac Straits Marina as well.
Michael, how do we compare in quality to the other J's?
I've got to say, we're right up there without a doubt. Yeah.
So one thing we had talked about is, I'm not sure what's happening with the whole building down there and everything, that we did want to offer at some time, maybe just like one washer, one dryer and a little boaters lounge. And that would make us similar to Petoskey and a few other places as an amenity if we were gonna be up high. So, it might be something just to think about if we stayed where we were until it's gonna get raised in 2024 anyway, and then we see what happens with our building, if that comes about or whatever.
That's a good point, Lisa. I was thinking the same thing. What is going on with that, getting the restrooms?
Well, let's
converting the other
let's stick
ones?
to the rates here first. We can talk about that later.
That's just a part of justifying an increased rate if we decide to go that way.
Well, whatever we do tonight is not gonna put that building in the ground next summer.
Yeah,
So-
I wasn't sure where it was because I've never been about it.
It's a function of our quality of our marina, but it's also a function of quality of our town. If people come here, and I think it's equal to Mackinac Island, sure.
I think we took a pretty good jump in this last year, didn't we? And we have another jump coming next year. Yeah, and I think we went from G to I last year. Does that make sense? Which was a 20% increase.
Yeah, it's good to know.
I would make proposals.
And I think we have another jump coming next year according to the state. So I'm inclined, you know me, I'm not afraid to charge, but I'm inclined to let it sit based on our history. We took a bigger jump than we needed to with inflation last year and let it sit, especially given a down year with voting.
That history is important to know. I would agree with you.
I make a proposal to stay at I.
I would second that.
Thinking.
What's that, Greg?
I was just gonna say, I think it's good thinking. I was unaware that we jumped from G to I. So, but I do think that Chip's point about, we're as good as Mackinac City, or at least we should be. And so we should charge for that, and then we can afford to do the washing machine and other things that will give us that high quality. But if they're gonna, so I agree with staying with I, since we've already jumped classes in a year.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Fire it up, Rachel.
Tom Graham,
No.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Karen Stroud, Chip Everett,
Yes.
Bill Brown.
Great, thanks. What else do we have to cover rate wise? I think that,
I think we've got everything, maybe.
I think we can let the market.
I'm teasing.
Oh, thank God.
Sorry.
We need a motion for that, baby.
Ice.
What do you say?
Ice.
Chip's talking about
Compete
ice.
with the Harvard market.
Exactly.
Next item on the agenda, renewal of the dock and dredge lease. And I see Zach and Andy are here. Thanks for wading through all this stuff. On that, the last time we went through this, there was a 2-year lease we did with them, and in those 2 years, from my perspective, they've done an excellent job of honoring what the agreement was down there. And they've been busy and doing what they should be doing with that stuff in there. We haven't had complaints here at this board. Have you had any, Michael? I don't know.
None. Nope.
Other than the crane heights, which we sat down with them and came up with a solution, and that's been applied religiously since then, which is good. So from my perspective, I found them to be a good lease holder on there. You guys want to chime in on anything or what you'd be looking for, or I'm presuming you want to renew.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, Zach Jones, Walton Dock and Dredge. Ford Park has worked out, pretty well over the past couple of years. That's been an adjustment in our operation. We've changed some things up on how we do business, how we haul dock sections. But overall, it's been a good experience. And we don't feel like there has been any issues with us operating at the park. You know, this contract renewal, we would like to do a longer term. You know, then we started with a 1 year, we went to a 2 year. We would really appreciate if the city considered a 5 year lease agreement for this round. That'll help us with, you know, peace of mind and longevity and being able to make investments into the business and continue serving Harbor Springs. So that's one thing that we would greatly appreciate. What else about this? Oh, the November, there is a clause in our contract that stipulates that the dock has to be removed by November 15th. However, that does not include the stop of work in the fall or that the barge has to. And so we would like that amended to state that the dock will come out when we finish the work, because removing the dock while we're still working is actually it's a pretty serious inconvenience and actually presents some safety issues with us trying to get back and forth at shore, or an efficiency issue of always having to go, you know, to a different dock to get somebody on shore. So those are the two things that we would like the council here to consider.
We should all know that there is one issue at Fort Park with some of the state money that came from a federal account as to what we can do down there commercially. The city is working on that. Raymer is in his bailiwick on this thing. And we may find out that we have approach how we do this differently down the road. We also may find out that what we're doing is totally fine and we're okay. So you should just keep that in your radar. I don't think it should affect what we're doing with these guys tonight. You guys are aware of that, I know. And but I'm not sure everybody else at this table knew that.
No.
So it's another example of how the state puts strings on things when you get money from them and you find out down the road it turns out to be a problem. So
Well, we don't want.
any questions for the operators?
Would that impact our ability to lengthen the term of the contract?
It would impact our ability to have a leaseholder down there.
Period.
Yes.
Okay.
When do you expect some kind of feedback on that decision?
No sooner than a year from now. So
If we enter into a long-term contract and then we can't have a contract, that's not a
We
good
would-
thing for either of us.
well, we would make sure that the contract that we signed with a 5 year extension with them specifies that if in the event that comes down from on high, then we have to go from there.
Could you not extend the existing contract for a year based on the outcome of the ruling? Then
I wouldn't want to do that, because the business should know that the city feels that they're worth the 5 year investment and the job they've been doing is satisfactory. And they have to share the risk with what happens, just like we do down the road with this thing. So I wouldn't want to do that personally. And if I was their business, I wouldn't want a 1 year contract, because how do you run a damn business on a 1 year contract?
how do you run a contract if you can't have it down there at all?
But that's something that they know about and
No, I appreciate
we're
that.
willing to accept on it.
So in your contract renewal, do you have a disclaimer that if the state doesn't allow you to be there, that the contract you have with us is null and void?
There's not currently one because I
Why
don't
would-
think this was
This didn't come up
come up.
at the
until
last
later.
contract renewal. We didn't know about it.
However, I think we would be comfortable with that, knowing, I mean, we've been operating, knowing about it for a few months now, and so, you know, if the state decides that dock and dredge is not essential to Harbor Springs, then that's what the state decides. It's out of everybody's hand in this room.
Well, the state would be deciding that, the state would be deciding that we can't have a commercial operation.
Right.
Or it doesn't matter about Wallstrom's or anything.
Right.
Right.
And that would affect the outfitter also.
Right, so I mean, that would be, I would be up for extending it to 5 years. If you know, if you're willing to take the risk that we all may be impacted by
I think 1 year was a trial period, 2 was a trial period, and you proved yourself. 5 years was great. What you guys do for the city and what we need in the city is invaluable. So I'm with Chip on that. I'd go for 5 years.
And I'd also be willing to, I like your idea of the dock too, with any sort of thing that might improve safety, extending the docking period from when you, as long as you guarantee get it out by the time you're done. I would be for that too.
How much further out would you think it would need to be?
No.
Oh, and it's not about the length of the
No,
dock.
I know
it's the
that. I'm talking about the
duration.
date.
Usually we try to make sure that we're wrapped up, before Thanksgiving. That's all weather dependent, like obviously we couldn't work today because of the wind and rain. This fall, we have a pretty big build job going on down in Roaring Brook, helping repair and rebuild their pier down there. So it's very dependent on the season. However, there comes a point, when the weather truly turns and conditions become unsafe, that we would have to stop, and that's, Thanksgiving, December-ish. So we'd actually not like a firm date on that, but appreciate that it, given some good faith that when we complete work for the season, that the dock will be removed from its spot.
Makes sense. I just have, but why was November 15th set as the date?
Honestly, Nancy, I don't know. I don't remember how that got in there.
I just am curious why that.
Everybody wants to go deer hunting.
I mean, it's kind of random that they.
Doesn't make
Right.
sense. So we're trying to clean that up.
Okay.
What are they paying presently?
And I'm just gonna bring that up, Tom. The lease arrangement is, if I remember right, 5,000 a year
That is correct.
on that. And we certainly have the opportunity to work on that a little bit, and I think we probably should. So certainly at an inflationary rate, and if we do a 5-year contract on that thing, maybe we should make it for 7,000 instead of 5, and that will accommodate whatever happens in there, or we make the motion that says it's adjusted yearly due to inflation. It's not simpler if we just tell them $7,000 or whatever, pick a number.
Is that simpler?
Based on what?
Look at that one.
Based on what?
No, it'd be simpler for everybody, I think, if we just told them it's gonna cost them $7,000 a year instead of 5. And then that stays the same for the 5-year period, rather than having to come back and have Nick figure out what inflation is and send them a bill and then go from there.
You're raising too much, you might have to lay off Fred,
Okay, 10,000. I like it. I'm with you. Simplicity is good.
So, I mean, should it be, is $6,000 enough, 7,500? I don't know. I guess in my mind, I was thinking 7,500, but I'm happy to look at anything else. I don't think that's a lot to ask for the volume of business they do down there and what they charge.
Well, 5% would be $250, right?
10% is what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're talking about 10% every year. That's a lot.
I'm with Chip on this one.
You want me to do-
Yeah.
I'm not all wound up about it. We just need to pick it up.
Yeah,
A 50% increase in rent is pretty substantial.
Means that we didn't charge enough at the front door.
So far, so based on the numbers, we increased slips 8%. Moorings 20%, but that was because there was a $5 jump on $25.
No, we get it, Zach. I know.
Yeah. So I mean, just, rough numbers, if we want to say it's inflation over the next 5 years is going to average 5%. Then, and we want a flat number, then maybe just the back of the envelope, we would raise the rate to, I need to figure it out, but it's like 6,000.
Is six a good number for you guys? I think that's the easy way to do it.
Yeah.
Pick the number. Go.
I
$250 a year for 5
agree with
years.
that.
Well, then I would move that we approve extending the lease with Wallstrom Dock and Dredge for an additional 5 years with an increase in the rate to $6,000 a year. The ability to take out the requirement that they remove the access dock by November 15th, that's struck from the contract. And subject to a positive
outcome with negotiations on the state for our ability to issue the permit. And we'll have to have Raymer write that up.
That's a proposal.
Yes.
I would second that.
Did you get all that, Rachel?
Another question.
Did I miss anything?
I do have one more request, I'm sorry. With the November 15th date, is there any way we can amend the current contract
Right.
to allow us to keep the dock in beyond November 15th of this year?
I would be. Does anybody have a problem with that?
No.
We wouldn't even know it if you want to know.
Just say, what's the penalty?
Well, it's been pointed out
Catch
before.
me if
like,
you can.
Mostly, I would like to be able to direct any complaints we receive personally from,
Okay,
so
so
any
let's,
residents to the
Let's,
city and have.
let's leave that set. Let's act on this right now. So why don't you read the motion back to me to make sure we got it all?
You made a motion to do a 5-year lease at $6,000 with Raymer adding something in there about the state and wherever that falls, and that was seconded by Jeff.
Yeah.
Victor will make it sound prettier.
A release clause
Yeah.
in the event of a.
But your motion also included the removal of the November.
Right.
15th date.
Yeah, I have
Striking
the
the
notes
11,
on that. Yep, that's added in.
Your motion of 6,000 every year or?
Yes.
Or renegotiate?
6 years.
6,000 every for the next 5 years. And that was seconded, Jeff, is that right?
Yes.
So motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Rachel, want to do a roll call vote, please?
Tom Graham,
Yes.
Jeff James,
Yes.
Jim Bartlett,
Yes.
Dan Sharp, Chip Everett,
Yes.
Bill Brown.
Great. And then to answer your question on the dock for this year, I don't know how we can do that here. Because we can't change that contract without council's approval, because this is a recommendation to council to approve this contract on that. John, what would help you do that? Nancy,
to council within the context of safety that we talked about. That's enough of the council.
So if you had a recommendation from the Harbor Commission that we allow Wall Street Dock and Dredge to leave their dock in until they're done working past the 11/15 contract date.
Yeah, for 2020.
Particularly since it's part of the go forward lease for the
Yeah.
same rationale.
Yeah.
To me, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And can we do that by consensus here? Everybody
Sure, I
nod
think
your
so.
head. So is that enough for you guys to do what you got to do? And that gives you the confidence you need to move forward.
Now, does not imply the council has approved anything.
I get that.
As part of the discussion. They may or may not get-
But we did our work.
Yeah, you did what you had ready.
that.
You guys have done a good job running that business down there. The city appreciates it, and we'll expect nothing less as we go forward. Keep up the good work. Michael. What? We're all still awake. It's 10 minutes to 6 almost.
Attached to the bottom of the stapled together sheets is right off the bat, a request from an organization called the Great Lakes 52s. For the past 2 years, they've been sponsoring a racing event, post regatta over in Bay Harbor. Over the past couple of years, they've had depth issues trying to leave the channel in Bay Harbor. They had 2 boats actually park up on their way in. Wow. Before they had full crew and full sails on board this year. They'd like to come to us next year because we have pretty much a guaranteed 18 feet of water on each one of our 60-foot slips. Would like to come to us for racing August 11th to 13th, but as the letter says, they'd like to be with us on the 9th of August and stay with us to the 14th. That's a pretty serious chunk of time, but it's a great event. Anybody who's witnessed these boats on the dock, it's pretty stellar bunch of guys, pretty stellar racing. Everybody is just super cool with the whole thing. That's a great bunch of people. They're talking about 8 boats, which is pretty substantial number for us dollar wise. And these guys are super well behaved, and I'd like to see them come to us next year. But they wanted to get a formal request to the council, just the same way we've done with rendezvous in the past.
You've got the room for them and all that, so I think it's a great thing to have.
Especially because it's 2 weeks after regatta.
Well, that's the question. Regatta's the last week of July.
Regatta's the last week of July.
Yeah, so that gives us 2 weeks in there, which is
Fantastic.
a plus.
My only issue with these guys is that they decide they'd like to stay after regatta right through the 14th of August, which we'd have to put the kibosh to right off the bat. Typically, they go over to Charlevoix and haul at Irish Boat Shop. Some of them disappear and go down to on the Macatawa and then back up this way, because that's where most of those boats end up in the summertime, excuse me, in the wintertime for storage. So that 9th or the 14th works for me. If somebody decides they'd like to stay for that period between regatta and the end of their event, I think we'd have to forestall that and just say that that can't happen. So
Well, I think wouldn't you handle them as a regular customer?
As a regular
If
customer,
you
yeah.
didn't have a waiting list.
Right.
You know, at noon when the
if we can
turnover
work
period-
that. But typically after regatta, we see quite a few boats that want to come to us, especially, the power boats that know that it's regatta time. And I think we can work around that for
I
sure.
think you handle them like any other customer outside of these days.
And their other concern is bringing spectator boats and also support boats for coaches. We may have to tap into Irish's dock space to try to accommodate those boats, so we don't displace any power boaters on our side, transient power boaters. But
Handle
that's
them
something we can work
like,
around as
handle them
well.
like everybody else.
We can work around that
We
as
have
well.
room, we have room. If we don't,
Yeah.
What about trailers? 'Cause I felt
Trailers,
like these guys come in
past
with
couple of
6
years,
trailers.
I'm sorry, JD, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
For the trailers for the past couple of years, Wallstrom's has accommodated all their work trailers. They think they charge them like $300 for whatever time period they're here. They provide them with power. It just tucks them away in the corner of the yard, and those guys love it. And it also eliminates, a couple of years back, I made the mistake of allowing trailers in the parking lot at the marina. And that just didn't work out very well from an aesthetic standpoint. So that Wallstrom's really stepped up to the plate 3 years ago, and it really worked out over the past couple of years. So that's where the trailers will end up. And they're all well aware of that. That was one of Tom's questions when he talked to me the other day. So
And how many boats in this, Mike? 8 boats?
they're talking 8 max. Okay.
That's great to me.
Anybody want to make a motion?
Oh, I'd make a motion, second, it's great.
And well, let's detail the motion. The motion would say we allow up to 8 boats with the Great Lakes 52 series from, well, it'd be the 7th. We do it from the 7th when they're going to arrive.
They'd start coming on the 7th, right? Practice sessions on the 9th. Yep. That
They
doesn't mean that
leave
all
on the
8,
14th, so it'll be 7th to the 13th.
that doesn't mean that all 8 of them will be here on the 7th of July.
And you could work, if they're not going to be here, you would have to hold a spot for
No,
them.
no.
So I think the motion ought to go from the 7th to the 4th, to the 3rd, to the 14th, if desired.
You said 7th of July, you meant 7th of August.
7th of August, I'm sorry. No, yeah, thank you.
Some might leave on the 13th, but some might have to stay till the 14th, right?
Probably most of those boats would leave on the 14th, that Monday, the 14th.
They'd be racing on the 13th.
Yes.
So they're going to leave the next day.
And then it'll be like a bash afterwards. Yeah. I can
So I
include
just
this letter
added
with
the
your
motion.
council packet.
Whoever made that motion. Is that Jeff?
Revise the dates for the.
I think
7th
Karen
to
made the
14th.
motion in a second.
All right, Rachel. You got the motion on that? 7th to the 14th?
Yeah, August 7th to 14th.
Great. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
same for opposed. It's nice that these guys of this kind of caliber want to come to Harbor Springs. You'll sail. What about the rest of your harbor master report, Mike?
Well, real quick, I guess, the end of this is gonna be the numbers right at the end of the sheet. No, I have it here somewhere. I apologize for some of the, it took me forever to pull this thing together because they had to use a 2021 template, and I am terrible at computers, as Rachel can attest, right? We all know the season started out stronger than we thought. Fuel prices were up. I think it was like $6.75 a gallon for fuel at Wallstrom's dock. Come down considerably since then, but now it's headed back up again. But given that and the beginning of the season and the way that the weather was in June and July, we had a 95-degree day in May, and then the next day was 55 degrees. So I think we had a pretty solid season all around. 2021, we saw a total number of registered boats at 775. Total number of boat days through October 1st in 2021 was 3195. In 2022, our total number of registered boats, this includes duplicates in both 21 and 22, was 753. But the total number of boat days was up almost 100 with 3278 for boat days for 2022. To get back to the staff, I had a solid staff this year. Lily Graham really stepped up. She came back to us this year after serving first year last year. Laura Graham fortunately came back after a sabbatical in Spain after an internship and really stepped up to the plate for a month and a half. And it was really great to have her here for regatta. I hired a lady by the name of Pat Rao, who worked on the ticket sales out at Nubs Knot this past winter. And I've actually sailed her boat when she had a slip with us, number 57, years and years ago. So she really stepped up to the plate and did a great job for us this year. What else did we have? Oh, yeah, we also had Abby Westmeyer. Abby is a basketball player at Denison University, so she was only good for about a month, but when she was here, she did a super solid job. As far as events went this season, we started off with the Boyne City Yacht Club. They brought us over 25 boats. It was a real shot in the arm and kind of a weak month in June. That was 15 more boats we've ever had with that group before. They're gonna bring the same number back to us in 2023. Regatta saw us working 35 boats. The DAC event in mid-August that you folks approved in 2021. I have to honestly say that was a bust. They talked about 20 boats. We only had 7 boats with us, and 2 of those didn't show up until the day they were supposed to leave. And we had a 85-footer that was supposed to be here that showed up for the afternoon with his 53-foot tender and only stayed for a couple hours. So fortunately, we had enough transient business that I could fill those spots with people coming off the water, but I can't let that happen again. So if we're going to do that again for them next year, obviously the dates will be different because we just approved the GL52 event, but required payment, no refunds, a cast in stone cancellation date. We got cancellations like the day of when they were supposed to be there. So that just didn't work out. Numbers. 2021, we did a little over $206,000 or a little short of 206. Seasonal dockage this year, we did 202. We did lose Joe D'Italia on Joe D'Italia's deposit. Unfortunately, after Joe's passing, we refunded him as the full amount.
It was a full amount, and that was a decision we made.
Yeah.
Which I would make.
Yep. Transient dockage this year was up about $1,000, which just surprised the heck out of me, given the way the season started. In 2021, we did a little bit under 211. This year, a little bit under 212. So it's not a substantial improvement, but again, as Chip said before, we were flat. Seasonal moorage was up almost $5,000. We were up at $80,000 for seasonal moorage. Transient dockage was, transient moorage, was $53.88. Dinghy and kayak storage, we're just a little bit short of last year. We added those 3 numbers together, dinghy payment, kayak storage, and also non-seasonal permits. We're down non-seasonal permits, probably 5 or 6 of those this year. The line tramp was about the same as last season, and that line tramp number includes seasonal and daily permits. Electric sales, a little bit up this year. Ice sales up this year because it was a pretty warm August. So our total for the year, including seasonal, transient, all the other aspects of that, $538,675. So the difference from last year was a little under $1,000. It doesn't even calculate as a percentage. So $983.35. And the difference, the most important numbers are right down at the bottom. We're a difference from last year. We're up $1,058 versus 2021. Due to a really strong season, we're at $31,662. But 2021 was a really strong season for us all the way around. This year, and again, it surprised the heck out of me that we did as well as we did, given the way the season started out. As a comparison, Petoskey was down almost 14%. Charlevoix was up only 10%. Northport was down almost 22%. So we actually stayed pretty strong all season long. So
I realize that budget isn't complete, but do you have a feel for how expenses range from 2018 to 2022?
I don't know. No.
Would it be something for us to consider just as there's enough space at the bottom, just an aggregate total to look at expenses versus revenue on the same page?
I know that given the staff that I had this year, wages were down probably substantially over the.
I'm not asking for a laundry list. I'm just thinking that in terms of a comparison, if we're looking at increases in revenues, we should be looking at expenses as well and see how we're faring.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Michael, I would take this as a moral victory. Having the season played out this year.
Yep.
So kudos to you and your staff.
The staff was really a big part of that this year for sure. As was the Harbor Commission, all your support, and Victor and Unfortunately, we lost Bridget Lemire, so we're training Tina to become Bridget's replacement. Bridget decided to move on to Petoskey in October, so. Just a couple of heads up, we know we had the power poles, and the power poles will be probably replaced beginning next week on the west dock. They'll just shut the west dock down, but John and the guys said it could probably take no more than 2 days, weather permitting. We did replace one of the finger piers on the east dock, number 5758. That had become problematic. It was just so wobbly at the end that it's like being a drunken sailor trying to walk out to the end of the dock to grab dock lines. So we replaced that. We also did some maintenance on what we call the head pier, out where Jim Bartlett keeps his boat, at number 56. We had a bunch of loose connections on the head pier itself and also the finger pier. So yeah. But in addition to replacing the dock, while they were here, they took advantage of some good weather to repair those dock sections. And they also cut us pretty substantial slack on that cost. They actually had the original price, so it worked out really well for us and for them. So
We will probably start to see a little more maintenance on that east dock. It's 25 years old now, maybe.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so I don't think they're out of line.
And Cody and I, when Cody was here and we were talking about replacing that one finger pier, did walk out and take a look at all the others. And he says we're probably a year or two away from having replaced one after the other. So, yeah. But we kind of knew that was going to be the issue down the road. And that's my report.
Michael, was he happy with the breakwater part of that dock?
Yes. Yeah.
Which was by far the most expensive part of the
Yep.
operation on it.
Yeah, he says that's
So we
solid
have-
as a rock.
We have good roots on that thing. We just, the parts that move more are taking more abuse.
And congratulations on your big award this year. too.
Yes.
I'm beyond honored to even be nominated and beyond honored to even receive the award. So it was a real treat. I almost didn't make it because I was on a bike ride at 4:30. I thought it was Wednesday and it was Tuesday, and the alert came up on my phone going, "You got a place to be."
You cleaned up pretty well.
Yeah. That's not what my sister said when she saw the photo. But thank you so much.
Coming here for the photo or not?
Nope. Made helmet head.
Well done, Michael.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mike? There was a mention earlier about the building. I want to let everybody know that we did meet with the original designers of the plan that we had put together with the concept of an extension to the west of the bathrooms, and they are working on laying out to see how that thing's going to work. So that is moving forward on that thing, and sure looks like it's going to fit in there pretty well. So we have something to talk about. We'll get it to the table and go from there. Any other comments from the floor or from the table? Any other comment? Yes, Kyle.
On that Marine Patrol.
You missed the part where we sent the council recommendation that you become the full-time Marine Patrol officer.
You're gonna have more crashes than you had this year. when you had more crashes. Is that above what Dean does, or is it above what Dean does?
I would
I
think
just want
so.
to plan accordingly. All right, thank you.
Any other comments from the floor? Our next meeting then is May 10th, although I wouldn't be surprised if we have to have one over the winter. We'll just see what happens, but we'll be in touch. And we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. That's our longest meeting of the year, folks.
Thank you. Bye.
I hate it through all of these.
Bye, Gregory.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Victor. Bye.
Thanks, Victor. Didn't know he was in.
I was there. Bye, guys.
Okay.
Yeah, this meeting's just.
The learning process.
Oh, yeah, I did, had my first round. Got this one going. Got this one